Hello everyone, this is Adrian with PrepAgent. Today we're going to be talking property ownership. Let me know if you can hear me. My apologies if I'm a little more congested than normal. Thought it would be a good idea to go for a hike last Friday with rain on the horizon and ended up getting caught in that, which gave me a bit of a bug too. So my apologies for that. I'll try and speak as clearly as I can. Excellent. It looks like everybody can hear me. Audio is okay, a-okay, says Bruce. Nice. Well, welcome to Monday morning. Hope everybody is excited to get some studying in, get the week started off on a good foot. And thank you, Imani. I will drink plenty of water. I am not Joe, however. Joe wasn't able to make it today. So that's why Adrian is here on a Monday. So hello to all of you. And we're not going to skip a beat. Joe is out, but I am here to spearhead some most productive studying is the point for today, right? So with that being said, I see that a bunch of people already threw up some 5 words. Cynthia studied severalty, concurrent, prescriptive easements, judgment liens, TT and P. Saw that some other people did some other things. Like Lynn studied estoppel, interim occupancy agreement, forbearance, and bilateral contracts. Some of that is going to apply today. Timeshares and short sales. Timeshares definitely apply today, although we don't talk about them too much with property ownership. But let's just go ahead and dive right in. So we're going to start today with the 2 main categories of property possession. I guess we call them property ownership. But does anybody have an idea of what I'm talking about when I talk about the 2 main categories of property ownership that we talk about a lot when studying for the real estate exam? I'll give you all a few minutes. Ooh, Abigail, gross, hit them right on the head. Freehold and leasehold, or less than freehold, right? Freehold and less than freehold, also known as leasehold. That's what I was looking at. Deborah, you have a good point as well. Severalty and concurrent ownership are also 2 very important ways to hold property. I was looking specifically for freehold and less than freehold. So can everybody tell me the 3 main types of freehold estates that we talk about when studying for the exam? The 3 main types of freehold estates. And I promise there's a point to this. I am going somewhere with this line of questioning. So right now we're looking for the types of freehold estates. Scotty hit one on the head with life estate. We've also got fee simple absolute and fee simple determinable, or fee simple defeasible, or fee simple conditional. Those all mean essentially the same thing. There's a condition in that type of ownership that can defeat the ownership. That's why defeasible is kind of the word I like to remember it by, because defeasible sounds a lot like defeatable. So those are our types of freehold estates. What about the less than freehold estates? What are the types of less than freehold estates? Remember, we also talked about those being referred to as leasehold estates, right? The less than freehold, same thing as leasehold estates. That's a great way to remember those, to remind you that they're not the same as fee simple ownership. So with leasehold estates, you're talking about estate for years, periodic tenancy, estate at will, and estate at sufferance. Nice work, everybody. So right there we've been talking about the freehold estates and the less than freehold estates. So we know what the different classifications of each of those are. What do we actually mean when we use the word estate with those? When we say a freehold estate, what does the word estate really mean? When we say a less than freehold estate, what does the word estate really mean? Good morning, Amy. Welcome. We're just talking about property ownership, freehold estates, and less than freehold estates. And right now, I'm asking everyone what the word estate means. And some of you are throwing up ownership. Some of you are throwing up possession or land, real property. And all of those are parts of it. I think Kim Ann West hit it closest on the head with duration. But we're just talking about an interest in real property. The word estate, used in that context, just means your interest in that property. So if I have a freehold estate, that means I have a freehold interest in that property or stake in that property, as Raxi Trini says. And what that means is that my ownership interest in the property or my interest in the property is pretty much free and clear, right? It's depending on the type, whether it's life estate, fee simple defeasible, or fee simple absolute. There's no real what they call paramount holder of title, okay? With the freehold estates, no paramount owner of title. With the less than freehold estates, your interest is more limited in some way, right? You have a much more limited amount of time, like it's based on a contract. You do not have the right to sell the property or to convey the property. You basically just have the right to possess the property, sort of control what it's used for while you're living there, and you have limited rights of exclusion and enjoyment. So all of those things I just talked about, those are a bunch of rights. What are those rights called? Ooh, congratulations, Jamela. Passed the exam last Thursday. Nice work. Now the real fun begins. Basically got your own business. So thank you, Abigail. I was looking for the bundle of rights. And those are the rights to possess, control, exclude, enjoy, and the right of disposition, right? So with the freehold estates, so with an interest in real property that's categorized under the freehold estates, you mostly have all of those rights. If you're talking life estates, then your rights of disposition, as far as being able to sell, rent, or transfer ownership, they're a little bit limited. And maybe we'll talk about those a little bit later. But if you have a less than freehold estate, so that means a less than freehold or a leasehold interest in a property, then you do not have the right of disposition most of the time, and you have limited rights of exclusion because there is a paramount holder of title. The landlord holds a title that gives them more rights than you have with a leasehold estate. Does that make sense to everybody, how all of those things are connected? The bundle of rights, what the word estate really means, and how those relate to freehold and less than freehold estates? Nicole Berry says yes. So I'm going to take that as a key that we're ready to move on. Ready to go. So let's jump into the questions on the board. Zoning ordinances control the use of privately owned land in several ways. Which of the following ways is not a zoning control? Is that A, restricting the area in which a building may occupy, B, providing for controls of rentals, C, regulation of land use, or D, restrictive height of buildings? What do you all think here? Zoning ordinances control the use of privately owned land in several ways, but providing for rent control is not a zoning control. Rent control is usually laid down by the government, so it is part of a government power, but it's not the same as zoning. Rent control is not the same. Looks like everybody was on point there. Nice work. We're gonna scoot ahead then. See what's next on the board. So I'm gonna re-log in here because it looks like got a little hang up with the exam. What are the other government powers? While I'm resetting here, what are the other government powers that we talk about? Finance video, says Nicole. Okay, crap. I don't remember if that's on the schedule for this week, but I'll make sure to get it in soon. So with the police powers, we're talking, or excuse me, with the 4 government powers, like a lot of people, it's easy to incorrectly just call them all police powers, but they're not. They're the 4 government powers, and we're talking about police, escheat, taxation, and eminent domain. Most of you threw up PEAT, which is our acronym for that, and that's a great way of remembering it. I don't know what's going on with my practice exam here. Oh, you know what? I do know what's going on with my practice exam. Just give me just 1 second. I need to get back into my own account. All right, nice work with that. The 4 government powers: police power, eminent domain, taxation, and escheat. Rent control does fall under one of those police powers. It's just not the same as zoning, right? Okay, so next question. Which of the following is considered personal property? A, growing trees. B, physical improvements. C, a trust deed or mortgage. Or D, land. So which of the following is considered personal property? That is a trust deed or mortgage. Can anybody tell me why? Why is a trust deed or mortgage considered personal property? Nice job, Carol. Because it goes with the person. It does not go with the land or the real property. It attaches to a person. And it's movable. It's a piece of paper. That's a great way to remember it. It's just a piece of paper. A piece of paper is movable. Therefore, it is personal property. So growing trees, because they're in the land and they're part of the land, are real property. What happens when you cut that tree down? What happens when the tree is no longer in the ground? What is the state of that tree as far as what we're concerned with studying for the real estate exam? Desert Ranch Girl says personal property. It is personal property. Nice work. Once you cut the tree down, it's personal property. While it's still in the ground, it is real property. Obviously, when you start dealing with emblements, which are crops specifically grown to be cultivated, there's a little bit of a gray area, right? So if a farmer is leasing land and plants a bunch of crops, those emblements are considered his personal property. But if a farmer owns the land that the crops are grown on and then goes to sell it, they're considered real property. Emblements are specifically planted crops that are planted for cultivation, usually on leased land. If there's any questions about that, let me know. I know it confuses some people. Otherwise, we're just going to move on. 2, the owner of a condominium unit learns that a neighbor has failed to pay his real estate taxes. If this neighbor does not pay the taxes, A, a lien can be filed against the condominium, including all of the units. B, a lien can be filed only against the common areas at the condominium. C, a lien can be filed against the neighbor's unit and his percentage of the common elements. And D, the taxing authority can order the condominium to be dissolved. What do you think here? Talking about the owner of a condominium unit. So with this, it helps to understand condos and like sort of how the ownership works. And it looks like you all have this nailed down really well. The owner of a condominium unit learns that a neighbor has failed to pay his real estate taxes. If the neighbor does not pay, C, a lien can be filed against the neighbor's unit and his percentage of the common elements. And why is that? Well, with condominium ownership, you are actually buying fee simple ownership of the unit and a certain percentage of the common elements. That is different than a cooperative. Can anybody tell me what you purchase in a cooperative that is different than purchasing a condominium unit? So a condo, you're actually getting real property and a percentage of the common elements, but like Peter and Lakeisha said, with a co-op, you're actually purchasing shares. You're basically purchasing shares of ownership in the entire building, so you don't own any specific element of that entire building, right? With a cooperative, you own basically like stock in a corporation. And so when you choose to move on from that, that's all you're selling. You don't have real property in that case. The holding entity or the corporation is who holds ownership of the actual real property with a co-op. Joel asks a great question. Is a co-op like a timeshare? It is similar in some ways, but not entirely. Does anybody know what makes a timeshare unique? What separates a timeshare from like co-op ownership? And it's a little bit in the name with timeshares. But with a timeshare, you are only buying interest, limited interest or access for a specific amount of time. So like Lynn says, you can own it for a week or only a few days. Last year, I went to Mexico and went to Cabo, and leaving the airport, I got roped into watching one of those things. I'm like, oh, no pressure sales. They're just going to tell me a little bit about their thing, and then they're going to give me like discounts. And that's completely a lie. It's high pressure sales. And basically the way a lot of these timeshares work now is that you're buying like points on a point system. And so you can use those points. If you buy 200 points, that gets you a week in, like a standard room, or it gets you 3 days in like a super ritzy high end room, right? But the whole thing is that you're buying interest only for a short amount of time. So you can only occupy the unit, and you don't get to really choose your unit, but you only get it for a certain amount of time. So with a timeshare, do you have ownership of real property? You have an interest in real property, similar to with a co-op. What you do have is a possession right to your property, right? You don't have fee simple ownership. You can't sell the actual real property, although you can sell your interest. But the answer is no, you don't own real property with a timeshare, right? So it's similar to a co-op in the sense that you only own an interest in the real property. You only own a share of it. That's why they call it a timeshare, right? And Carol asked, do you have to pay HOA all year for timeshares? I'm not sure if this comes up on the exam, but yes, you actually With a timeshare, you're generally paying all year. And the reason that they do that, the reason they tell you that they do that is because it's really expensive to buy into these resorts, right? And so they give you a nice little payment plan where you're only paying, a couple $1,000 um, per month, so that when you choose to go, your $8,000 stay or whatever is already paid for. And somebody asked, Lotis said, yes, you can actually sell your interest. You can sell it with timeshare. You can convey your interest in it, but that's not real property. It's not like a condo where you can sell a specific unit or where you're really gaining equity in quite the same way. You are gaining equity in that you're paying down what you owe for the timeshare. Excuse me. Promise I didn't cough into the keyboard, so nobody's going to get coronavirus here. But that's the same thing with the co-op, right? You can sell your share in a co-op. You can sell your interest in a co-op. And your interest, is, if you've paid on it for 5 years, then you're going to have the equity in the sense that it's going to be worth more than you owe personally on that share. But hopefully that makes sense. So with a co-op, it's basically just a shared apartment-like building. I had a friend who used to live in a co-op, and it wasn't kept up quite as nicely. I mean, it was an older building, right? It was a bunch of lofts, really cool space. They let you build out your space however you wanted. But my friends who had an ownership interest there, that's all they had, was an ownership interest, just like a timeshare that they could sell. So hopefully that answers those questions. And somebody asked, what is an option? An option is a contract, Sharon, to purchase real property. So a lot of times when an option comes up, it's commercial a lot of times, although sometimes used in residential. But it's a situation where somebody is leasing a property or chooses to lease a property, and the owner, and maybe they ask, like, hey, are you thinking about selling this place anytime soon? And the owner might say, like, well, maybe. And the person leasing it says, look, I will pay you $5,000 right now if you give me first dibs on an option to buy next year. And if the owner, the landlord, says, like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I have been thinking about selling this. I'm willing to give you that option in exchange for $5,000. That keeps the option open. It is an option to buy. So we're going to get back into some questions on the board. What is the time frame in which a supplier must file a notice in the public record of a mechanic's lien for materials supplied? Is that A, within 60 days of the material being supplied? B, 90 days after work begins? C, within 90 days of the material being supplied? Or D, within 6 months of the material being supplied? So I do want to address a couple of other questions that came up. Angela, yes, these webinars usually run for 30 to 35 minutes. I tend to go a little bit long because I like talking to you all, so I'll go 35 to 40. Carol asked, is custom furniture for a house real property? Not generally, although the intention of the seller would be the most important factor there. If the custom furniture was sort of attached to the property and the owner, the seller, was always intending on leaving that behind, then it would be real. But generally, furniture is not, unless it's like actually built into like a built-in bookcase would be real property, but a custom built couch would generally not be. Romulo Romano pointed out in California that exclusive agency listing is now referred to as residential listing agreement seller reserved. That may be, I've heard that a lot this year, Romulo, but when you go and look at the DRE's vocabulary or real estate glossary, they still talk about exclusive agency there. So, I would go with whatever your pre-license people are telling you on that. But that's not necessarily an end-all be-all switch of terminology because there's still plenty of reference in California to exclusive agency. All right. So back to our question on the board. What is the time frame in which a supplier must file a notice in the public record of a mechanic's lien for materials supplied? The answer is C, within 90 days of the material being supplied. And here's the important part of this question. This can actually change municipality to municipality, depending on where you live. It could be a little bit different than 90 days. But what's most important, it is in 90 days of the material being supplied, right? So if you've contracted to do work on a property and that material shows up 15 days before you're able to start work, your mechanic's lien time frame begins of whenever that material was supplied, not when you're able to start work. And as far as I can tell, that is consistent from state to state. That little piece of it is consistent. So it is a matter of when the material is supplied when you're talking about mechanic's liens. Makes sense. Donna asks, testing this Friday, should you still be referencing the book or just PrepAgent? As far as all the vocabulary, the concept videos, national stuff, you should definitely be sticking with PrepAgent. We will completely get you prepared for that. For state-specific stuff, it doesn't hurt if there's something in our state-specific practice exam that you don't understand or you're a little cloudy on, definitely reference your book or Google that, because that's all we have on the state-specific stuff. And if you're in a state where you have a state portion of the exam, your book can still help you there. All right, next up. Oh, Dana Michelle says makes sense because that is when the mechanic would be out of pocket cost. That's a great point that I hadn't thought of. So that totally makes sense. The right to control one's property includes all of the following except A, the right to exclude the utilities meter reader, B, the right to enjoy pride of ownership, C, the right to erect no trespassing signs, or D, the right to invite people on the property for a political fundraiser. Lotis, we don't have any crash courses specifically. What we recommend for the last week of review, and Joe just did a video of this. I think it went up. I don't remember if it went up on YouTube or Instagram, but he just did a video on test taking tips where he talks about what you should be doing the night before and kind of the week before taking the exam. And the idea is to just sort of mostly review what you know in the few days leading up to the exam because you're putting a lot of stress on your mind trying to absorb and learn new information. And most likely, it's just more likely that that's going to overwhelm you come test taking time. And you want to be in a confident, relaxed state when you take the test, right? So it's much better in the days leading up to the exam to just focus on confirming the knowledge you already have instead of adding new things. Like it'll help you much more on the actual exam if you are 100% about the answers you do know than if you're 80% about those and then you're trying to remember 20% of something new you just learned but didn't really learn that well. Does that make sense? Winona says he put it up on YouTube. Thank you. I appreciate that. So that video is on our YouTube channel. Good luck to those who are taking the exam, by the way. Back to the question on the board here. The right to control one's property includes all of the following except A, the right to exclude the utilities meter reader. Why is that? What does the utilities meter reader have that takes away one's right to exclude that person from your property? What do you think? A Erebor asks, where is state-specific stuff? Send us if you're not sure about that, because there are times when we're revising specific state stuff and we don't have it available. So if that's the case for where you're at, you can send us a message using the contact form on our website, and I'll look into that for you, all right? So easement in gross, great job. Jared Jones, first up on the board with easement in gross. The utilities meter reader is going to have an easement in gross to check the utilities meter, and that's what gives them the right to go onto your property and check that, and it takes away your right to exclude them from the property. Right, we're going to get a couple more questions in here. This one does come up on many people's real estate exams for PSI. The primary justification for zoning ordinances is to A, promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. B, maintain physical conformity of buildings in a zoned area. C, prevent an oversupply of certain types of business enterprises within a zoned area. Or D, control the quality of building construction within a zoned area. We have pretty good consensus here. So the primary justification for zoning ordinances is to A, promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. And I know that it seems like sort of an odd connection between those two, but that specific wording, promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare, is a common legal description of the police powers as far as those 4 government powers we talked about earlier, Pete, right? So police powers, the general justification for police powers is that they are to promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare, and that zoning falls under police powers. What controls the quality of building construction within a zoned area? Any ideas? But sir, when we go through these, one of the main points of doing this webinar is to sort of dive a little bit deeper into these, give you a little bit understanding. So if you want to take practice exams a little faster, you can access those in your account and burn through that as quickly as you like. Building codes, that is correct. Building codes are what controls the quality of building construction within a zoned area. Nice work. All right, next up. When the rent charged is based on the gross sales of a business, the lease is correctly termed A, avoidable lease, B, a net lease, C, a percentage lease, or D, a gross lease. What does everybody think here? And the wording can be a little bit tricky here. When the rent charged is based on the gross sales of a business, the lease is correctly termed C, a percentage lease. Everybody got that right? That's awesome to see. What exactly is a gross lease? So, one of the ways this question tries to confuse you is by giving you the gross sales of a business in the question, and then giving you a gross lease as an answer. What exactly is a gross lease? Scotty says a regular lease, basic rent, right? That is like fixed rent, a flat fee, where you pay a gross amount or a fixed amount that covers everything within that rent agreement. All right, last question for the day. And I'm gonna skip that one because I think a lot of us probably know that. This one confuses people a little more. So the holder of a reversionary interest in a qualified fee estate might be able to obtain title to the property. A, only if the remainderman died first. B, if the holder of the qualified fee estate sells the property. C, if the holder of the qualified fee estate breaks the deed condition. Or D, if the conditions changed and the owner was unable to meet the requirements. So what does everybody think here? The holder of a reversionary interest in a qualified fee estate. So we opened up today's webinar talking about this. Qualified fee estate is another way of saying what? So of the three types of fee estates that we talked about, or the fee simple ownership estates, that's misleading. Of the three types of freehold estates that we talked about, which one is this? And it's just a different way of referring to defeasible, like Martina says, a fee simple defeasible. That's what a qualified fee estate is. So that can help give you a little bit of clue as to the answer. The holder of a reversionary interest in a qualified fee estate can obtain title to the property C if the holder of the qualified fee estate breaks the deed condition, right? So with the fee simple defeasible, Joe often talks about, like, I will sell you this land as long as you do not sell alcohol on it. Well, if the person that you sell the land to opens up a bar and sells alcohol on it, that breaks the condition of ownership that they had, and that would give the holder of the, how best to explain this? That would give the original grantor of the land a reversionary interest in the land. So the actual condition that's placed on that ownership, in this case alcohol, you can have the land as long as no alcohol is sold on it, that gives the original grantor a reversionary interest in that land. If that condition is broken, the original grantor can exercise that reversionary interest, right? That is different than a remainder interest where in a life estate you say, I'm going to give this land, to my wife for the length of her life. Once she passes away, the land will go to my son. That son would then hold a remainder interest. That's the difference between reversionary and remainder. All right? That is going to do it for today, everybody. Hope we answered some questions for you, got you started off on the right foot. Want everybody to have a fantastic week of studying. Remember that Joe recommends, and I think it's a great idea, I agree, that it's a good idea to study at least 5 vocabulary words a day. It's a great way of learning those 5 terms really well because you think about them throughout the day. Oh yeah, my 5 words were blah, and you're not overwhelming yourself. And I also want to wish good luck to everybody who's got the exam, like Hassan 718 exam tomorrow morning. Good luck with that. And everybody who has the exam, hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and we will see you tomorrow, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern.